Good morning. May buntag sa tanan.
Good morning.
Morning, Doc Chona and
Morning.
Ma'am Abet.
Good
And
morning.
thank you for taking the time to do this data orientation. So let us formally start. Again, welcome to our faculty, our deans, Dr. Grace Paayas, our faculty, our graduate students. Thank you for taking the time to do this graduate lecture with us. So this is our third for the school year. This is the data orientation for longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child, or LCFC. So we can start. Let us start this data orientation, this lecture, with a prayer. So we have placed prayer here. So may I ask us to join, maybe in silence. So let us place ourselves in God's holy presence. Let us make the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, and the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So for this prayer is for the children in the world. So Almighty Creator and Divine Providence, Almighty Father, in your boundless grace, we come before you today to dedicate our hearts and minds to the Filipino children, the living promises of tomorrow. As we engage in this noble endeavor of longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child, we humbly ask for your guidance. May this enlighten the paths to their well-being, education, and holistic growth. Grant us the clarity to understand the layers of their experiences, the patience to see the long-term unfolding of their lives, and the wisdom to discern the interventions that will open doors to their success. May we become a beacon of change, bringing forth policies and programs that will ensure their protection, nurture their potential, and honor their dignity. Bless the hands and the hearts of everyone involved in this study, Dr. Chana, her team, um, Dr. Dr. Chana, her team, Dr. Borja, Dr. Charles, Miss Bass, Miss Abet, the researchers, educators, caregivers, and communities. Unite them in purpose and compassion. We pray for the children's health, for their joy to be unceasing, and for their spirits, that every number and every statistic that I see the child's face and the family struggle for their future. In your loving name, we pray. Amen. Okay, so at this point, let us we move to the Savior hymn. Let us try. Okay. Okay. Our for maybe we can set aside for the meantime our Savior hymn. But again, let me welcome everyone to our graduate lecture series, the data orientation, longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child. May I ask everyone, our students, to give, if you are a student, could you please raise your virtual hand, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, if you are our, thank you very much, Miss Mia. Okay, Miss Mary, Miss Marinel, Mr. Salaudin, thank you very much for raising your hand. Thank you for participating. May I ask our faculty, our deans, our administrators to give a heart, please, if you are here. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Emilina. Okay, a heart, please, for our from our graduates, faculty and deans. From yesterday to date, we had 90 registrants. Usually they come in on time. Okay, so again, thank you very much. So again, this is longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child. And this lecture will offer an introduction to the to the expansive data LCSFC data set. So if you are a student, a graduate student, in some of our programs, if you are faculty, you may begin to consider the information in this data set for your thesis, dissertations, or your capstone, special project, or for your research projects. So we think that as graduate students and faculty, in the social sciences, in sociology, psychology, education, health sciences, economics, nursing, public administration, environmental sciences, and data sciences, we thought that this data set may be relevant to you. So may I introduce our resource speakers, our resource persons. Let me start with Dr. Chona Chavez. We know Dr. Chona is the director of RIMCO, a research institute of Mindanao culture. Dr. Chona is a senior researcher to the deputy director and interim director of the Afghanistan Research and Evaluation Unit, or REU. She also served as a consultant to a number of international organizations, and she has worked in Cambodia and in the Pacific Island countries. She has a PhD in demography from the Australian National University in Canberra and a master's degree in development communication with the cognate in rural sociology from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She completed her bachelor's degree in agriculture from Xavier University, Cagayan de Oro. So Dr. Chona is our own. We also thank Dr. Chona for facilitating this data lecture with us. Let us give Dr. Chona a heart, please. Okay, thank you. Our next resource person, let me introduce Dr. Judith B. Borja. She is the LCSFC lead investigator and OPS consultant. She is the consultant investigator and immediate past director of the Office of Population Studies Foundation, Inc., or OPS of the University of San Carlos. She is among the lead investigators of the ongoing longitudinal cohort study of the Filipino child, which examines how the Sustainable Development Goals influence the lives of a large nationally representative cohorts of Filipinos from age 10 to 24. Pag 24 di ay, kay child pa di ay. She has a PhD in nutrition from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, a master's in applied nutrition from the University of the Philippines at Los Baños, and a BS Nutrition and Dietetics degree from the University of San Carlos. Dr. Borja is among the survey specialists at OPS, and her research expertise spans health, nutrition, and demographic outcomes throughout the life course. Let us welcome Dr. Judith B. Borja. Heart, please, for Dr. Judith. Okay, thank you, Dr. Judith. Our next resource person is Dr. Charles Andrew P. Bautista. Dr. Charles is a Senior Policy Research Associate at the DOH in the Philippines and plays a critical role in formulating health policies. He is with the UNFPA Philippines on Population and Development Policy. Dr. Bautista holds a Bachelor's of Science in Health Sciences from Ateneo de Manila and a medical degree from its School of Medicine and Public Health. His academic and professional pursuits are characterized by a focus on public health advocacy and policy development. Let us give Dr. Charles a heart, please. Dr. Charles, I got this picture from your Facebook page, so I'm asking permission after the fact. Our next speaker is Miss Isabelita N. Bas, Ma'am Abet. She is the data manager, USC Office of Population Studies, Inc. She is the research and database consultant of the Office of Population Studies of University of San Carlos, has served as data manager for all OPS surveys for almost 3 decades, overseeing data processing activities and database maintenance. She currently handles data management for the LCSFC and she has a master's degree in health social science from De La Salle University. Let us give Ma'am Abet, Miss Isabelita Enbas a heart, please. So our resource speakers for today are, again, Dr. Chona Chavez, Director of RIMCO, Dr. Judith B. Borja, LCFC Lead Investigator and OPS Consultant, Dr. Charles Andrew P. Bautista, Population and Dev Analyst of UNFPA, and Ma'am Abet Isabelita N. Bas, Data Manager of USC Office of Population Studies. Let us give Dr. Chavez, Dr. Borja, Dr. Andrew, Ma'am Abet a heart, please. Okay, so at this point, may I give this to Dr. Chona, the floor to Dr. Chona Chavez to give us an overview, to provide us an overview of the LCSFC data. Dr. Chona.
Yes, good morning. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Dean Rach. I would like to really I think you've been welcomed, everyone. But what I would like to say is I will be very brief with my introduction because Doc Judith will cover the details. But I would like to emphasize that it's with great pleasure and privilege, again, to welcome all of you to this graduate lecture series that focuses on the longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child data orientation session. So it is really we are very happy at RIMCO because as a research institution, we have been trying our very best to share our research findings to inform both policy and practice, because research should not only remain in the websites, not only in the library, in reports, but it should be utilized. It's really very important, or else the 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 resources, both money as well as the people going to the field and the experience they have encountered, dili nato I would like to speak in Bisaya na dili nato bayaran ug magamit kung dili nato gamiton gyud, no? We should use what we have gathered. So data sharing is another way not to maximize and utilize data already gathered for further analysis. But in doing so, there are also protocols to follow. We need to know what's the research design, what's the quantitative data processing and flow and the file structure, the inventory of the quantitative variables, and how are we going to go through the protocols of data use, no? And how to request it, and the application for the LCSFC data. Hence, that's the reason why we are giving more time to Dr. Judith Borja. We call him Doc Jude or Doc Judith, and that of Charles Andrew. We call him Doc Drew, and then also Ma'am Isabelita Abbas. We call her Abet. So these are the people who will give us more information of the data. And then I also would like to remind each one who is listening to this sharing that, again, as what Dean Rach noted earlier in her introduction, that behind all of these numbers that you will be looking into are children, mga bata, and also their families, their households, the caregivers who also responded to that of our questions, because we have, of course, we call the children index child, and then we have the caregiver, where it's this are the either the mother or whoever no will take the place na the primary caregiver when the children are still minors. And then so we have the household data as well. Nag-preempt ako, but Doc Judith will expound more on this. So I would give the overall goal of the LCSFC. It's a mouthful, huh? And then as noted, the details will be given. So the overall goal is to examine how the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, I believe our faculty as well as our graduate students are very familiar of the SDG. We've been dealing with this, we've been talking with this in our classrooms, and even beyond the four walls of our classroom. We were seeing how this influenced the lives of the Filipinos from childhood through adulthood throughout the SDG implementation period. So as you notice, the SDG implementation is from 2015 to 2030. And our study covers such. No? So we've been collecting SDG data. We know that there are 17 SDG goals. And out of these 17, 13 of the SDG goals are covered in our longitudinal study. So we wanted to examine how lives of a cohort of Filipinos are changed as they transition from adolescence to young adulthood in the course of our country's implementation of the SDG agenda. So we know pretty well that the country signatories of the SDG agenda reports what has been done, what has on this. So this cohort of Filipinos represent the SDG generation, or the population sector in which the country's demographic dividend depends. Specifically, the study aims to contribute to the body of evidence on population dynamics and sexual reproductive health and rights, with a special focus on the SDG agenda. So I just would like to note, later on perhaps I can share, but after or in between. So there is a picture of the SDG, of the children that we've been interviewing. So when they were still 10 years old, because we started when they are 10, and then until they will be 24. So 10 years old, our interviewers were nagduko, no? While we were, because there is this anthropometry wherein we get their weight as well as their height. Kay mubo pa man sila, gagmay pa man sila sa una, ang among mga our interviewers, when they measure the height, nagduko. But now we are now on our 7th wave, and in fact, the teams are now in the field. And then from the time that our interviewers, the researchers in the field, are bending down to get their height, now they have to use up kanang kuan, mutungtong na sila, because nowadays, after our 7th wave of coming back and going back to the same children, taas na. Some of them are even taller than our interviewers. So you can really see, we are amazed. We are so amazed on the development, as this really kanang giingon diri na as they transition na ang uban na anay from children nagdagko na, and even some of them have their own children as well. So I'm going back to contribute to the body of evidence on population dynamics and the sexual reproductive health and rights, with special focus on the SDG agenda. We also would like to provide an evidence-based. We always emphasize that all our policies or programs or whatever we do should be evidence-based. So dili na haka-haka, dili na nga sige basin og mauni, but we have the data to provide. So provide an evidence-based resource that will inform national policy making and development planning, particularly on how the SDG contribute to maximizing the potential of the Filipino youth. So kanang, and we are also very proud later on, this will also be shown how our data are being used, no, to inform policy and practice, because we have the evidence, no. So the main study, there is this, we have the quantitative, the longitudinal survey is designed to prospectively observe and collect quantitative data. I'm pretty sure you are familiar with quantitative and qualitative data, quantitative and qualitative research method. So this particular, our longitudinal study have used both. The quantitative is the main one, and every year since 2016, we've been collecting quantitative data through survey when the children were still 10 years old. And we will do so until they reach 24 years old, and that would be in 2030. So the Research Institute for Mindanao Culture is taking charge of the Mindanao domain, and then the CISRE in Visayas is taking a charge of the Visayas domain. And then for Luzon, it's the DRDF. It's in Luzon. So that's the quantitative side, but there is also taking care also by the same research institutions is a separate qualitative research component. And for the, if we are now on our 7th wave for our quantitative side, we just completed our 2nd wave for our qualitative side. So we have both data, although 2 waves from the qualitative approach. And then since we are just now on the field collecting the 7th wave for our quantitative data, we have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th wave. So with that, I would like now to hand over the virtual floor back to Dean Rach, because I am pretty sure Doc Judith, Doc Drew, and Ma'am Abet have lots of things to share in this morning session. Thank you very much for coming over and for attending, and best wishes to a very fruitful discussion and interaction in today's orientation. Thank you very much. Dean Rach,
Okay,
back
thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you, Doc Chona. Okay, let us give Doc Chona a heart. Siya gid akong una gihangyo ani nga kanang kung matagaan ba ta possible sa access or to apply for access sa LCSFC data. So I understand Dr. Chona kay busy gid siya kaayo, but she has kanang given us this opportunity. So thank you kaayo, Dr. Chona. So at this point, may introduce Dr. Judith B. Borja. Dr. Judith and also Ma'am Abet will take us through the LCSFC's research design and data processing flow. When they share, maybe may I suggest that we take down notes, maybe. So any questions that we will have, so you can raise those questions later. So may I give the virtual floor to Dr. Jude or Dr. Judith and also to Ms. Abet.
Good morning. I
Good
hope you can
morning.
hear me clearly. Good morning, Dean Rachel Compagno. And, good morning, Dr. Chona Chavez. My thanks to you for organizing this workshop or this orientation session rather. And my thanks to everyone for their interest in the longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child. As Dr. Chavez has mentioned earlier, it's really very important for no matter how good the quality of the research is, if it's not being used for policy programming, for policy, or even for program planning, if it's not the data sets are not used for further research purposes, the data quality, the research data is not considered valuable. So I'm really happy that this morning I'm talking to future LCSFC users. I hope that after this orientation session, you'll be more interested in looking at the data and using the data for your studies, particularly for the graduate students and for the faculty for the research projects as well. There is always value in doing secondary data analysis because of the comprehensive and the wide array of variables that we've collected. Variables will be utilized for a good research purpose. So again, my thanks before I begin. And I'd like to start with an overview of the LCSFC. I may not see that once I start sharing the screen, I may not see raised hands. So if you could just hold on to your questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions at the end of each segment of the presentation. So we've broken down the presentations into shorter segments so that we could have Q&A shortly after. So, I'd like to start sharing the screen now, Dean, if it's okay.
Yes, please, Doc. Thank you.
Ah. Can everyone see what I've shared on screen?
Yes,
Yes,
Doc.
yes, we
Okay.
can. Mhm.
So thank you. So let me begin with the objectives for this session. I hope these are also the aspects that you're expecting to meet in this morning's session. So I'll start off by describing the LCSFC, particularly its research design, and then we'll discuss the data processing flow and the file structures. This would be very important to know, particularly for those who are planning to use the data. It will be Abet who will be talking about the data processing and the file features of the LCSFC. We'll share with you or describe the variables that we've collected today in the study. And we're joined this morning by Dr. Charles Andrew Bautista, who's with the United Nations Population Fund, Philippines, or UNFPA. He's the population development analyst at UNFPA and has been overseeing operations for the LCSFC for UNFPA. He'll talk about the process of requesting the data sets from UNFPA, who owns the data. What the procedures are. And then I'll end with short presentation of what we have of the key findings that we have come up today for the profile of the cohort today. So let me begin. Oops. An overview. So the LCSFC, or the Longitudinal Cohort Study on the Filipino Child, is jointly supported by the Philippine government. We are under the oversight of a National Steering Committee, which consists of lead government agencies such as NEDA, DOH, SWD, DepEd, DOLE, PSA, CPD. The National Steering Committee is chaired by NEDA, and we report to the National Steering Committee at least once a year. We share key findings from the surveys to the National Steering Committee. They also oversee the design of the instruments, the questions that are asked at each round. This study is being funded by the United Nations Population Fund, UNICEF, and it has received funding from the Australian government and the joint SDG fund. So this large research endeavor can't happen without the help of our research partners from across the country. So this study features a research collaboration of the lead research institutions, particularly on demographic studies in the country. So the Office of Population Studies Foundation, incorporated with the University of San Carlos, is the lead implementing institution. So we designed the survey and we handle the overall survey, the study implementation. And helping us across the country, particularly in data collection across the island groups, are the Demographic Research and Development Foundation of the University of the Philippines Population Institute. They handle all operations in Luzon. And for the Visayas, we're joined by our co-USC institution, the Center for Social Research and Education, and handling operations in Mindanao, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Chavez, is the Research Institute for Mindanao Culture. When we started the baseline study, Dr. Magdalena Cabaraban headed the RIMCO operations, and then Dr. Chavez took over after perhaps was it the third wave? And we are also joined by an impressive team of experts who serve as consultants to the study. We have some of you from Xavier University may still know Dr. Alejandro Herri, was once as an alumni and also formerly from RIMCO. He's our policy advisor. And we have policy notes writers from the University of San Carlos. Our statistical consultant is Dr. Erniel Barrios. He designed our sampling scheme, and he also designed some of the known national surveys, such as the Young Adolescent Fertility Survey, or YAFS. We have a psychologist consultants on board, and I'll explain later on the mental health variables that we collect. And also they provide their own hand in terms of any need for counseling on the part of the adolescent respondents as well as the interviewers. And Dr. Chavez mentioned earlier that we also conduct qualitative research. I'll talk more about that in a while. And our qualitative research consultant is Dr. Fiscalina Nolasco. And we've now shifted to computer-assisted interviewing. And so we have Mr. Leo Ocampo, who's also the programming consultant of the YAFS study. So let me begin by giving you the backstory or the motivation behind doing the study. As you all know, the SDG implementation period it runs for 15 years. It's from 2015 to 2030. This period also coincides with the period where the country is expected to experience its youth bulge. I'm sure some of you have already heard this. This is the period, actually it runs from 2015 to 2050, when the country is expected to experience a historic increase in the population between 15 to 29. So from this slide, you'll see the population pyramids between in 2017 and 2050. You'll see that bulge, in the middle. So this is the a 15 to 29 age group is considered the working age group, because this is when at age 15 the Filipinos begin their labor market participation. This is the age group that begins their working career. Now, if we have this large population of working age Filipinos, and if all of them are working, then this demographic phenomenon would easily translate into economic growth, because all of them are contributing to the economy and also decreases the dependency ratio. However, what is the critical operative word there is that they are productive working age Filipinos. So it's very important as we experience this youth bulge to make sure that those who are transitioning into this working age population, so the children who are moving or transitioning to this working age group throughout in the course of the SDG implementation, that they be equipped with the human capital foundation or the skills and the capacity to become productive. In other words, for this youth bulge to gain, it's what we call the demographic dividend, or for this demographic phenomenon to translate into economic growth, this large mass of working age population must be productive. So that's one of the important assets or benefits that we could obtain through the programs that are implemented to meet the SDG targets, because specific goals, SDG goals are focused on the human capital foundation of the youth. So the main impetus for doing the study is to examine how the SDG generation, so this is the Filipinos who are transitioning from childhood through young adulthood within the SDG implementation period, to see how this SDG generation is faring while programs designed to meet the SDG targets are in place. So earlier, I heard Dean Rachel say that, these studies up until age 24, child paday gihapon. Actually, this study is a story, is a narrative, a story of the Filipino child, as he or she transitions from childhood to adolescence to young adulthood, or to the working age group I was referring to you earlier, in the course of the SDG agenda implementation. So the overarching goals of the study were also already mentioned by Dr. Chavez earlier. This is really to contribute, the study is designed to contribute to the body of evidence on population dynamics and SRH, with a special focus on the SDGs. So this study is a way of producing empirical data on which we could base policies and program planning, and even researches, and on how the SDG agenda can contribute to maximizing the potentials of the Filipino youth. The main study of the LCSFC is the longitudinal study. So we collect quantitative variables from the longitudinal study. We also collect qualitative data as a supplement to the study, and these qualitative studies on marginalized adolescents. So if there's anyone in the group interested in to know more about the qualitative data, I'd be happy to also describe that within this session. So for now, let me focus on the bigger component of the LCSFC, which is the longitudinal survey. So this is a prospective, forward-looking study of a cohort of Filipinos who were aged 10 in 2016 when we started the study. And the same sample is observed until they reach age 24 in 2030. We collect multi-level data. We collect individual level data on the cohort themselves as they age, from age 10 through 24. We also collect data on their parents over time. We also collect household level data. We collect information about the household as well as their families, and also collect community level data. We collect information on the barangays where they reside, where the cohort resides. This sample is nationally representative of all 10-year-old children in 2016 across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So we can make generalizations on the results for Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. We could not, for us, for the sample to be representative of a more disaggregated component, for instance, at the regional level, we would require a much larger sample size. And so we opted to just look at the island groups, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, as our key sampling domains. We adopted a two-stage sample selection scheme. Our primary sampling unit is the barangay. The barangays were chosen using the probability proportional to size systematic sampling scheme, meaning the probability of barangays across the country to be selected into the study would be higher depending on the number of children who are age 10 in their barangay. So our final sampling draw came up with 345 barangays across the country with the most number of 10-year-old children. For each sample barangay, we randomly selected 15 households with 10-year-old children. We selected just one 10-year-old children. If there were more, if this were an extended family, we selected only one 10-year-old child in each household. Let me skip that and I'll go back to that slide in a little while. So the objective of the study is to retain about 2,000 of the cohort at age 24 in 2030. Our estimates show that with a sample size of about 2,000, we should be able to still come up with reasonable prevalence estimates which are statistically accurate. So in order to retain 2,000 in 2030, our estimates also show that we needed to recruit about 5,000 10-year-old children in 2016. And as shown in this slide, the LCSFC collects data on important milestones in the cohort's life course throughout each data collection survey. So we've collected, now that our latest survey, completed survey, which was completed in the last quarter of 2022, the cohort was age 16. So through this period, we've examined their pubertal transition. This is one of the few studies that really looked at panel data on pubertal transition. We also, in the course of the data collection, in the course of the waves, we also collect transitions in their sexual experiences, from crush lang to actual sexual intercourse. We also collect data on, now that some of them have already experienced pregnancy, we now collect, we now have a module on their pregnancy and cohabitation exposures. The study also tracks their schooling transitions, from elementary up until postgraduate or college, and then their entries as well as exits in the labor force. As also mentioned by Dr. Chavez earlier, so out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we collect data on 13 of these 17 goals. We excluded those with a more global perspective and for which data are difficult to capture. But most of our variables that we collect, most of the variables that we collect in the study focus on goals 1 to 5, which is the most interest in the human capital formation of the youth. So that's goals 1 is on ending poverty, goal 2 is in ending hunger, achieving food security and improving nutrition. Goal 3 is ensuring healthy lives, and promote well-being. So this includes mental health as well as their sexual and reproductive health. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. So we collect a lot of school performance schooling indicators. And we also, in all of our analyses, we look at gender differences, and to also measure goal 5, which is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Being designed as a longitudinal study, we collect the same core modules at each wave, at each survey. And this allows us to make comparisons across the waves or as the cohort ages on these core modules. And as I've mentioned earlier, as they age and as they are expected to reach specific milestones, we add questions to the survey to measure these. So next I'll be describing the completed surveys and also this quick profile on the cohort at each wave. So this slide shows that we have so far conducted 6 full surveys. As I've mentioned earlier, we just completed our latest full survey at the last quarter of 2022, when the cohort's now age 16 and between grades 10 and 11. We started the baseline survey in 2016. And as you can see, we actually reached our target, well, close enough, target goal of recruiting about 5,000 10-year-old children at baseline. At that time, they were most of them were between grades 4 and 5. In the LCSFC, the data collection protocol is designed to be done through home visits, through in-person interviews. And if you look at the row for wave 4, you'll see that the retention rate was the lowest, because this was when we were midway the study when the pandemic hit. So we started the data collection in January, and by March of 2020, we were getting advice from UNFPA and from the National Steering Committee that lockdowns were already starting to be in place, and so we had to abruptly stop field operations in March of 2020. Of course, for the safety of our respondents as well as for the safety of our field researchers. So we were only able to reach 62% of our target sample for wave 4. But I think despite the lower sample size for this wave, the data remain viable because we make adjustments in the analysis using sampling weights. What a big contribution of the LCSFC to literature is that the fact that we managed to collect data on the cohort in the course of the pandemic. So in November of 2020, we were lucky enough to get funding to do a quick phone tracking survey on the cohort to check on them and also to check on their cohort COVID-19 experiences. So this was our first experience with conducting a large-scale phone survey across the country. And you'll see that in the third column, we only still managed to reach 64% of the target sample by phone. You can imagine the difficulties encountered in the phone survey, among which were the poor connectivity, lack of poor signals, phone numbers no longer working. But despite that, the sample is still sufficiently large enough to make important empirical analyses. And again, with sampling weights application, the data remain very important. In fact, we've done important analysis on how the pandemic has affected the lives of the cohort using this data. We were all set to go back to the field, to go back to doing home visits by the Wave 5 full survey in 2021. However, there was another COVID surge as we were about to start data collection. So we resorted to doing the survey by phone. But this time around, you'll see that we got so much better with our phone survey, learning so much from the initial phone survey that we conducted that we reached 85% of the sample. So these three surveys, the Wave 4 data, the Wave 4A data, as well as the Wave 5 data, represent very important data on the experiences of the cohort with the pandemic, starting with how they were shortly before the pandemic, in the early stages of the pandemic in November 2020, and in the later stage of the pandemic in 2021. I'll later show you some of the results, and some of the impact that we have seen on the cohort's lives. So by Wave 6, we were back in business, and we're back to retaining about 91%, which is 91% of the sample, and that's about within our expected retention rate estimates. So as I've mentioned at the start, before I started this presentation, what makes this research endeavor more meaningful is that our data have been utilized by the lead government agencies. It's also useful or helpful that this study is overseen by the National Steering Committee, and so they get first dibs on the study results. And so they hopefully utilize our research findings to inform their policy and action planning. So our studies results have already been incorporated in the latest DepEd Basic Education Development Plan, particularly on the school performance findings. The NED has already incorporated our study results, particularly on stunting, in their Philippine Development Plan. We were asked by DOLE to present our data on child work and labor in the first National Child Labor Committee. This was even during the pandemic. And we were also invited to share our food security results in the Interagency Task Force on Zero Hunger and the Task Force on the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases have also looked at our pandemic data. As expected, the UNFPA and UNICEF have used our data in their country programs, and the more recent users of our data are the Second Congressional Committee on Education. Sorry, the word education is missing there. So they're now in the process of analyzing the data to present their findings to the lower house as well as to the Senate. We also released brief summaries of important findings from the LCSFC through policy notes. This is the fastest way of disseminating key results to the government agencies, as well as to the policy and research communities. These policy notes have discussion papers that are also in progress, hopefully to be published soon. Here's the policy notes writing team. There's Dr. Herin in the middle. And this was taken at OPS. So this is our OPS library. We've also presented in local conferences as well as international conferences. And more importantly, we've been presenting to government agencies, particularly with NEDA, the Social Development Committee has invited the LCSFC team in several occasions to present their findings. The Social Development Committee of NEDA is the policy coordinating body of NEDA. Here's some photos of our research dissemination activities. You'll recognize some Xavier University personalities in this photo. Our reports and policy notes are available online through the OPS website. And I hope you'll visit these links. And for more information on the study, you may, and particularly for data use requests, you can send an email to Dr. Bautista at UNFPA. Okay, but before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to stop and give time for people to ask questions. I've shared quite a bit of information. Any questions on the presentation so far?
Thank you, Dr. Jude, for your presentation. Maybe we have some questions. Our graduate students, our faculty, if we have any questions, we can raise to Dr. Judith. Dr. Jude, maybe we're
Yes.
still digesting the
Yes, okay.
large amount of data. My
Okay.
staff is also still digesting the extensive amount of data.
Yeah, of course, yes. So, okay, perhaps as we go along, there'll be more questions. No? Okay, let me continue then. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, oh, sorry. So next we'll be discussing sorry. Okay. So next I'll be discussing the file structure as well as the data processing flow. And this is just to sort of open up the discussion before Abet takes over. So as I've mentioned earlier, we collect multi-level data at the individual, household, as well as community levels. So we have a household questionnaire where we interview the index child's mother, or in the absence of the mother, we interview the father or a relevant caregiver who's an adult and also a member of the household. We have several index child questionnaires. By index child, I'm referring to the cohort participants who we're following from age 10 to 24. So we have an interviewer-administered questionnaire. We also have a self-administered questionnaire where we ask the more sensitive questions on risky behaviors, no, and sexual experiences. At age 11, in the second wave, we conducted an IQ test. We collected the Raven Standard Progressive. We administered the Raven Standard Progressive Matrix, which is a measure of fluid intelligence. And then at each round, we collect the community survey data, and the respondents for this questionnaire are mainly the barangay captain, the barangay secretary, and we also collect health statistics as well as and price information. And so we have multiple respondents for the community questionnaire. For our mental health measure, we use the ASIBA or the Achenbach system of empirically based assessment. These are a series of instruments that measure child adaptive and maladaptive functioning. And so in the pre-pandemic waves, that's in wave 2 in 2018, when the cohort was at age 11, we administered the child behavior checklist, which was, so that the ASIBA instruments is a set of instruments that administered to the parent, to the youth themselves, as well as to teachers. So in the LCSFC, we use both the parent instrument as well as the youth instrument. The parent instrument is called the Child Behavior Checklist. So at age 11, we administered the questionnaire to the mothers or caregivers. This was because at age 11, some of the complex questions may not be able to, may be too deep for the 11-year-old child. In wave 4, this was shortly before the pandemic started. When the cohort was age 13, we administered the youth self-report. It's exactly the same questionnaire as the child behavior checklist, but this time from the perspective of the youth. So this was done through a self-administered method, questionnaire method. And during the pandemic, at the early start of the pandemic in November 2020, we selected few items from the ASIBA instruments, from the CBCL actually, and to measure anxiety. And this was asked of the mother's caregiver. And remember, this was a phone survey, so we only interviewed the mother. And then in the late pandemic period, in wave 5, that's in 2021, we administered the full youth self-report module with the respondent as, with the IC as the index child as the respondent. This was administered through an interview-administered questionnaire because the wave 5 survey was done by phone. So this just summarizes the kind of data that were collected over time. So at age 10, or in the baseline survey at wave 1, we did the household questionnaire, the index child questionnaires. Actually, we conducted this in all the waves, full survey modules. And the community survey questionnaire, the community survey for wave 5 was difficult to do because of the COVID surge. And so we conducted this much later. The community survey data are collected in tandem, usually collected in tandem with the household questionnaire and the index child interviews, so that we could have comparable time periods. However, when we conducted wave 5, because we could not do in-person interviews as it's required in the community survey questionnaire, we conducted the community survey much later than the household and interview surveys. And for wave 6, since the wave 6 was done just a few months after the community survey, so for these 2 waves, we used the community survey conducted in between the 2 waves. Again, this shows on the last column, you see that the mental health instruments were administered at wave 10, at wave 4, and some items were conducted in the phone tracking survey, which is done by where we interviewed the mothers, as well as in wave 5. And the IQ test was conducted at age 11. So now I'd like to stop here and have Abet continue with the data processing lecture. Hi, Beth. Nakamute ka, Beth.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
Morning,
Abet.
Morning. Let me start sharing my screen.
Yes, please, ma'am.
Ay, sorry. Saan? Okay na ba? Nakita na nyo?
Okay,
Yes,
i-full
Beth.
screen lang palihog, Beth.
A full screen.
Yeah. Kanang full slideshow ba?
Mm. Sorry, asa naman to? Sorry ha.
It's okay, Ma'am Abet. Take your time.
I want to
I-click sa ubos, Beth.
Oo, sa ubot.
ah,
I-click lang tong full screen, Beth.
naa sa
sa
ubos.
ubos.
Oh.
okay. Share na no?
Yes.
Is it not
I-click-
showing?
I-click sa ubos.
Kaning
ng-
sa ubos, Beth.
ayaw na, Beth. Ayaw na. Katong sa ubos. Kani sa ubos anang imong slide. Naay mura
Yes,
og
ma'am.
TV.
Ay, Beth, gusto ka ako'y mo share sa screen? Sa imong slide?
Walang Jude.
Okay.
Sorry ha. Full
I-slide
screen.
show bitaw, i-slide sa ubos bitaw, Beth. I-slide show
Slideshow, no?
sa ubos, at the lower.
Here.
Sige,
Here.
actually, yeah.
Tibog ka na, Beth na.
Click off running share. Kana
Okay.
i-delete
Oh.
na, and then
Nasa ubos. Kana, Beth.
sa
Here.
ubos. Kanang slideshow bitaw, Beth, sa ubos.
Kanang murag na TV,
Slideshow.
Beth.
Okay. Actually, this is okay if
Kana. Kani. Sige. Naay notes. There is notes and then another one. Kanang pinakalas, ana, before kanang naay linya. Notes. Then 1, 2, 3, 4.
Ala, asan man eh.
Ma'am Abet, naapod sa taas, ma'am, slideshow,
Yes.
file, home, insert, draw, design, transitions, animation, slideshow. Sa
so
left,
click on slideshow, Beth.
nasa imong left side, tingali, left side, file,
Left
home.
side.
Yes,
Sa,
ma'am. Oh,
sa
sorry.
taas.
Yeah.
Okay,
Next,
kana. Click on slideshow.
no,
Ay,
slideshow,
okay.
ma'am.
Ala,
Sige lang,
sorry,
Beth.
kaayo.
Just show the as is. Bisag wala ma slideshow. It's
Yes.
okay.
It's okay.
So just click on the file. I think you all can see naman, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Wadera.
Sige. And then if
Dara,
you could
dara.
just tangtanga lang
This
ning sa
one.
left.
How
Yes,
about this
there
one?
you go. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, go.
Okay.
Okay, can you start sa very there? Okay, thanks,
Okay.
Beth.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for that.
No worries,
First time to
ma'am.
share my screen on a Zoom meeting. So I'm very glad to share to you the data processing flow and file structure of the longitudinal cohort study on the Filipino child data sets. Let me start with describing the modes of how we collected our data. So in waves 1 and 2, we use the pen and paper personal interview or PAPI. And then in wave 3, we started using computer assisted personal interview or CAPI in one of our survey components, the IC questionnaire while continuing to use PAPI for the household and the community survey components. So starting in wave 4, we shifted fully to CAPI. So this is to show to you the flow of data collected through PAPI. So the questionnaires, the printed questionnaires, when administered and the responses are already recorded, are then checked for correctness while still in the field by the interviewers, as well as their respective team leaders. So when the questionnaires are completed, they are sent to OPS for editing and coding by team of office editors, then passed on to the encoding team in order for our data in the questionnaire to be converted to electronic format. Then the data files are checked and made sure that all the data that we have are accurate as much as we can be able to verify for some inconsistencies. Then we do more processing of the final data files, and then we come up with the data files for sharing. Then in CAPI, we use the census and survey processing system software, or CS Pro, designed by the US Census Bureau. CAPI relies on gadgets, computer, tablet, or cell phone and internet connection. This is for to load the programs in the gadget, and also for synchronization and sending files to the server. But during interviews, internet connection is not needed. So this is important since some of our sample areas are remote areas, walang internet connection doon. So it's advantageous that CAPI can run during interviews without internet connection needed to run the program. So to show you the flow of data collected using CAPI, so same with the data collected using the questionnaires. They are reviewed while still in the field and edited by the team, the interviewer, and their corresponding team leader to ensure that the entries are accurate while they are still in the field and can make callbacks to their respondents. Then they do data synchronization. Synchronization is a process whereby the files in each of the in a team, in all of the tablets. So meron na siya automatic backup, then na-send na yung data doon sa server. So then we come up with the final raw data files when all data from the tablets are logical inconsistencies are prevented. So better yung data quality. So sa PAPI naman, we do some we have skip patterns na during encoding. So sa in copy, better na yun kasi while interviewing na mga skipping instructions na wala na yung mga logical inconsistencies, so better ang data natin collected through copy. The data entry is immediate, meaning while interviewing, meron na siyang, na-recorded na yung data, so na-encode na yung data. The questioning is dynamic as the questionnaire can adapt based on the previous responses. Copy can also store other medium of data. So in LCFC, we collected images since we took a picture of the index children. So aside from the database files, we have images stored in our data sets. Copy provides quick transfer of data for analysis. So while still in the data collection phase, we can do preliminary analysis if needed. Halimbawa, when we want to know how many respondents had been interviewed. So when using copy, we can do that to do some preliminary checks by using the data available. So to continue, data collected are then checked for coding or encoding errors. Then by running some checking programs, we check for outliers, too high or too low value. So we can check for that, and we can do necessary edits by making verifications or clarifications, if possible, to our interviewers. We also convert string responses to numeric codes, as there are questions that are in string. So our data sets are all quantitative, so we convert them to numeric codes. Data cleaning can also be done by checking for inconsistent data across waves. Meron tayong mga variables na we can check for values na medyo inconsistent. Halimbawa, yung mga measurement in height should not be lower sa current wave than in the previous wave. So that's one of the checking that we do. Other variables na ma-check natin across waves are variables like ages and grades, no? Kasi progressive yung mga variables na yun, hindi she should not be lower in the current wave than in the past wave. We identify our data sets before sharing them to data users. By de-identifying, we remove names and any personal identifiers. Since we assure our respondents of confidentiality at the start of collecting their information, we remove any identifier that would link them to the identity of the respondent. Also, the names of their sample barangays, their addresses, the geocodes. So wala talagang mga information in our data set that will link our respondents to their information that they share. So also some like information like names of organization, clubs, or other names na, kasi some of these would include names of barangays or names of that would link them to respondents. So we don't include them in our data sets. So let's go to file structure. Let me show you a page of the questionnaire. So this is from Block C on household assets, income, and expenses. So in the questionnaire, we have is divided into different blocks. So each of the blocks, meron siyang question number, the corresponding question, as well as the codes that are assigned to the responses. So when you will be using our data sets, you will need the questionnaire to guide you to check for the information that you want to use in your analysis. This is a page in the code book on the household assets and income and expenses, for example, in wave 6. So meron siyang question number, variable name, and variable description. So this will guide you in using your variable or data that you are interested in your analysis. So this is a document where the file details are indicated. So we have the file number, the block, the file name, the records per ID, whether single or multiple, the description, and the corresponding questions in the questionnaire where the variables are found. And then we have the number of variables and the number of observations. This is for the household survey component. We have also for the index children component, and then also for the community. So notice that in records per ID, we have single and multiple records. So single observations file or single record per ID is a horizontal file structure. So this is the database example from the food insecurity section. So each of the respondent will have a single record for each of these record represent one household respondent. So one household respondent will only have one record in this particular section. As compared to the single observations file, we have the vertical file structure, which is a multiple observations file. This is a file with several records per ID. One good example is the household members data file, wherein the number of records would correspond to the number of household members. So in this example, the household members data file from the household roster, we have 6 records for this particular ID. Each of these represent one household member. So they are identified by their line number. So notice that iba-iba yung number of records depending on the number of household members. So we have IDs for each record. For the household and index child, we have the IC-based ID. And for the community survey, we have barangay ID. Let me describe to you the variable barangay ID. This is a random number assigned to each of the sample barangay. So we have a total of 345 sample barangays in baseline, 115 barangays each from the 3 domains. By using data, we assigned a random number from 1 to 345 for each of the barangay. So when we continued with our in the next waves, we have sample households that move to other barangays. So we continue the numbering of the barangay ID. As of now, I think we have up to 900 barangays wherein the sample households move into IC-based ID is it's just a combination of barangay ID and the household number. Each of the sample barangay has 15 sample households that are numbered 1 to 15. So example, household 1 of barangay 1 will have an IC-based ID of 1001. The last 3 digits represent the household number, while the 4th to the 6th digit to the left represent the barangay ID. So household 2 of barangay 345 is 345002, for example. Let me continue by describing to you the file. When merging files, you will use the IC-based ID. If you are using data variables within household, since they are in different files, you want to use a variable in one of the files. For example, in block A, you want to combine that with a variable in another block. You will use IC-based ID to merge those variables. And within household files and within index child's files. When merging household files and with index child's files, IC-based ID variable is also used. When you want to connect your household and index child files with the community data, use barangay ID variable. I think you will be more familiar with this when you will start to use our data set in the future. So our final data files are released with the following documents. So we have the file details as I have described earlier. Nandun yung description, number of variables or number of observations. And the code books also per Stata file. Our files are in Stata, our data files are in Stata. And then you will also be provided with the questionnaires. So these are helpful for you when you will be using our data sets to refer to these files and be able to use our data in the future when you will gain access to the data. I think these are what I can share. And if you have any questions, we will be very glad to entertain them about the data. Thank you very much, and thank you for bearing the glitch
Thank you,
earlier.
Beth.
Thank you, Ma'am Abet.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to Doc Jude. Maybe at this point, we have some questions for Doc Jude, from Doc Judith and Ma'am Abet,
Beth.
on the data structure before we proceed to Dr. Drew, on the inventory of quantitative variables.
It will be me, giving that presentation. Dean,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
then the doctor will talk about data use.
Okay.
So any questions on how to use the data? Just want to clarify the while data processing is so much easier and more efficient, no, in with the copy mode data collection, we expect no differences, no, in data, whether collected through PAPI or copy, because we apply the same set of data processing procedures, whether manually or through the computer. So we expect no difference in terms of data collection.
Yes, thank you, Doc Jude. May I invite our graduate students, our faculty, whether they have some questions they want to raise at this point, for Dr. Jude and for Ma'am Abet, maybe related to the data structure and the research design. Doc Jude, I have one question, if it
Sure.
is okay to ask. If we are given access to the data set, Doc Jude, would we be given access to the whole data set or to just a portion? For example, just for the mental health portion, or will be, if we are given access, or will that be for the whole data set or just a portion again?
Dr. will talk more about the data use request mode, but to quickly answer your question, you need to specify which files you need for your analysis. So if you don't need the entire data sets structure for your analysis, then you can always ask for specific blocks or files. But Dr. will talk more about that.
Okay, thank you, Doc Jude, for that. Thank you.
And also, so Dr. let me go through the inventory, variable inventory first. So the next I'll be talking about the kind of variables that are collected in the LCSFC. This will be very important, and I think this is also something that you could include in your data use request, to have the a copy of the inventory of variables, because this would be your guide in the selection of variables that you'd like to request. So let me once again share my screen. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, we can.
So as I've said, we collect multi-level data. We collect data on specifically on the index child or the cohort who we're tracking now from age 10 to 24. We also collect data on the mother, caregiver, the household, as well as in the community. So we have separate spreadsheets this is an Excel file. So we have separate spreadsheets for the variables that are collected at each level. And we've also put together all the questions related to COVID in one spreadsheet. So just to help you, just to go through the file with you. So we have in the first column, the variable domains, no, or the constructs that are collected, or the descriptions, no. And then, for instance, we have, of course, the IDs. All files will have the IDs, ID variables, as explained by Abet earlier. So each file will have each household and community and index child related files will have the IC-based ID as well as the barangay ID, in case you would like to link the file to the community survey data. And of course, we have the basic profile data, date of birth, age at each survey, the marital status, and number of biological siblings, the birth order. We collect data on the IC migration, as far as within the survey component is concerned. At baseline, we also ask about their prior residences, addresses. And then we have a module on disasters, preparedness. In the household questionnaire, we have a module on disasters. And we collect data on retrospective data on early nutrition at baseline. And then we have for the pubertal measurements. We applied the Tanner's sexual maturity rating, or administered rather the Tanner's sexual maturity rating in the early stages. And we have morbidity and disability modules, and their health behaviors. Of course, a very important construct that's measured in the study, their schooling. No? So we have a wide array of school-related variables. Sorry, I'm scrolling. I hope di mo malibat as I scroll. And so forth. Their reading behaviors, their cognitive, and this is the mental health variables, and so forth. No, so you can go through each this file to search for the variables that you're interested. We indicated where that variable is located, which file, and if it were a multi-file questionnaire, which block. And then at which wave these questions were asked. No? So we have a check mark for each variable, right, for each wave. And then this would be the mother caregiver related questions. And at the household level, we have household specific questions. We also have a household roster. So we have data on their household members, And at the community level, these are the questions that we ask. Some of these, because for those who would like to do econometrics, the community survey will be a good source for the exogenous variables that you can use to control in your analysis, like the price survey and so forth. And this spreadsheet is devoted to the questions that we ask in the pandemic surveys, which would be wave 4A and wave 5. Okay, so this variable, this file rather, would be very useful for all of you who will be using the data. I think this will be your first step. When you finally get hold of the data, go through the variable inventory. And most importantly, also, although our files are, by the way, we release the data in Stata format. So I guess it's up to you to, if you're using SPSS or or R or some other statistical platforms, you'll take charge of transforming or converting the data sets into the data format that you prefer for the analysis. It's, as Betas mentioned, it's really important for you to not just go for some, I've noticed that for some of the users that just look at the data, because our data have variable labels as well as value labels. So in fact, you technically don't need to look at the code books and the questionnaire. You just look at this data sets, and you can get the gist of what file is about, but it's very important for you, as mentioned by Abet, to go through the questionnaires, understand the questionnaire structure, as well as look at the code books, because you'll get added information. You need to be very careful when you're using the data. Be careful in not just looking at running your analysis just on the basis of what you know from the data sets, but it's important to look at the questionnaire structure as well as the code book definitions, because for added information, and also to provide context to the variables that you are looking at. This would explain, by going through the questionnaire structure as well as the code books, you'll understand why there are missing values for a particular variable. So again, it's the whole package that needs to be understood and reviewed, no? The questionnaire, the code book, as well as the files, statistical files. Okay, so and then Dr. will then talk to you about data use, and after his talk, we'll go through some of the key findings that we have, and this will also give you an idea on the kind of variables that we have collected and how they are presented. So I'll turn you over to Doc Drew. Morning, Doc Drew.
Good morning.
Morning, Dr. Drew.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. So, I'll run through this very quickly. So, these are the data use guidelines for the study. So I'm sure that you've had enough background, no, about this study. And just to share with you that this study is a collaboration with the government and the academic institutions like OPS, ISRE, DRDF, and RINCO. And at this point, we have already collected almost 7 waves of data. So that's since 2016, we've collected 6 waves plus 1 additional survey when COVID-19 hit. In principle, because as Judith mentioned, we're very much open for researchers, students to actually access the data. And this is important for us because we've invested a lot of money in this particular study, and we hope that it gets used not just by policymakers, but also by even students. No? So we want to create a community of researchers in the country. So just a brief overview. This one, I just want to highlight that at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we do follow our standard research ethics protocols. And when you access the data, we hope that you comply to the same, no? In principle, because although we are very much open for researchers to access the data, we just want to make sure that we also ensure the safety of our respondents. Remember that they are children, and these are very sensitive information. So we do hope that you take the research ethics and also respecting the privacy of the respondents very seriously. So what types of information and data can be accessed from the study? Of course, you will have your reports and policy briefs produced by our collaborators, and you can access most of these in the website of the University of San Carlos Office for Population Studies. But at the same time, for students and researchers, you can actually access the quantitative survey microdata public use file. So we already have available data from waves 1 to wave 6. And you can, so there are 2 ways to access this, no? It's either through an institutional data sharing agreement. So currently we have an institutional data sharing agreement with RIMCO, OPS, and DRDF. And so in principle, all of their staff and their students can access through their data sharing agreement. If you're not part of these institutions, you can actually request the data directly from UNFPA for the time being. For the qualitative data, for the qualitative surveys, this is actually by special approval. Unfortunately, we cannot, we need, this one will take longer if we're gonna request it because we need to review actually the protocols for the qualitative data, given that it's harder to filter identifiers from the qualitative surveys. So all of this, once you request data, we will provide you like a data use form. And all of these critical points will be in that form. So we would recommend that you read through it first before you sign. But we just want to highlight some important key points, no? So as much as we, with the exception of institutional agreements at the end of the day, the use of the data is non-transferable, meaning it's only the requester who can use the data. Please do not share it with your friends. Don't put it in any public website or in an unsecured Google Drive. And we do expect that, although we're not gonna police it that much, but we do expect that as researchers, you take this very seriously. Ensure that the data is stored properly. On principle, you put it on a cloud server with exclusive access to your requesting party on a secure network, on a password protected removable drive or USB drive, or a local drive in a password protected PC or laptop. Again, these are sensitive data from children, so please take care of the data. As much as possible, we will not be providing any personal identifiers in the data that you will be requesting. And please do not make any attempt to identify any of the respondents in the survey or reveal any barangay or location data from the survey. Because even if we don't provide you the personal identifiers, if you try hard enough, some people will be actually be able to identify, no, some of the respondents. And of course, as researchers, as we know this, that we properly cite the source of the data. UNFPA and its partners and collaborators, unless agreed otherwise, will not own any intellectual property of your research once you produce anything. So whatever analysis you do from the data, it is yours, but please properly cite that the source of the data is the cohort study. At the same time, of course, any analysis that you do as a disclaimer, will not reflect the official stance, viewpoint, or assessment of the UNFPA partners and collaborators, and it will not be an official analysis of the core study unless agreed otherwise. So although you're using secondary data, also, we do expect researchers who will do the analysis to make, especially if their analysis will be presented or published, to follow your national guidelines on research ethics. So we know that any research on human subjects, regardless if you're using secondary data, will require ethics approval. So that's a quick overview. This is the most important slide because at the end of the day, if you have any questions, or if you want to request the data directly, you can actually email us, UNFPA. Through this email, you can email me. But at the same time, because we already provided institutional data use agreements with DRDF, CISRE, OPS, and RIMCO, so you could actually access the data through their institutional data use agreements. So I think for Xavier University, you could collaborate with RIMCO in terms of accessing the data. So that's it. It's a very short presentation, but please don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions or concerns. In principle, the requirements will let you fill up an individual data use form and provide us a one paragraph research abstract so that we could review the data request properly. So, thank you very much. I'm over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Drew, for the for the overview. Yes, Doc Jude, would you like to say something? Yes, please.
So much, Dr. Ru. Just an added layer of information. I think for if you were to avail of the institutional data use agreement, I think we require that whoever is the user will be under the supervision of the research institutions directors or of the LCSFC coordinators in each institution. So there'll be some oversight. Am I right, Dr. Ru?
Yes, the responsibility will fall under the institution to
Yeah.
ensure oversight of the users. Yeah.
Also, we as you can imagine, we have papers that are also ongoing and in progress. So when you request for the data, we have like for some topics that are on reserve for the research collaborate because the research collaborators are working on this for publication. So we also try to avoid overlaps. Of course, it's really hard to have a direct overlap in because of the many different angles that you can look into. So no paper can really be the same, exactly the same, but just be good to make sure that. So for now, we have reserved some topics for the research collaborators to work on, but you'll be provided through the list of the publication lists. So you'll know topics that are already being worked on. There are no questions. I'm sure that everyone's still registering, absorbing the many information that we have shared so far, and there'll be more in this morning's session. So thank you very much, Dr. Drew.
Thank you so much. I have to leave for another activity.
Yes,
so
I know it's very busy, right? Thank you, Dr. Drew.
Thank you,
And
Dr. Ru.
so what's to follow our would there be anyone interested in the qualitative data? Because I could also talk more about that, but in the interest of time, if there's no one really interested, I can skip that and then go straight to the cohort profile presentation of sharing some of the key findings. Would you mind if we do a quick 5-minute bathroom break, Dean, Rachel?
Yes, Doc. Yes,
So
Doc.
for the rest to also take
Okay.
a quick rest
Okay,
before
thank
we
you.
proceed.
Yes, yes, Doc. 5 minutes. Okay, let's give Doc Drew a virtual clap before he leaves. Okay, thank you, Doc Drew. Thank you for taking the time. Okay. Yes, Doc Drew will take a 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Everything I want, here's to you. Never sleeping through from midnight till the morning. Had to crawl before you walked, before you ran, before I knew it. You were trying to free your fingers from my hand, 'cause you could do it on your own. Now, somehow, slow down. Won't you stay here a minute more? I know you wanna walk through the door, but it's all too fast. Let's make it last a little while. I pointed to the sky, and now you wanna fly. I know you made us fly. I hope you know why, but do you think you can slow down? Here's to you, every missing tooth, every bedtime story. Here's to Barbie cars, lightsaber wars, sleeping in on Sunday. Had to crawl before you walked, before you ran, before I knew it. You were teaching me the only thing love can. Hold hands through it when it's scary. You got me. Let's slow down. Won't you stay a minute more? I know you wanna walk through the door, but it's all too fast. Let's make it last a little while. I pointed to the sky, and now you wanna fly. I know you miss me. I hope you know I am, but do you think you can somehow slow down? Please don't roll away to me. I know I'm embarrassing. Someday you'll understand. You'll hold a little hand as if they can. Cause it's such somehow slow down, slow down.
Yes, Doc Jude, you may want to continue. Sorry. Sorry, Doc.
No worries. Okay, so let me continue on. First of all, anyone interested in the qualitative data?
I am interested, Doc.
Ah, you are? Okay, sige. So let me describe that first before I start with the cohort profile. Um, you all see my slide.
Yes, Doc.
Okay, so for the qualitative study component of the LCSFC, we made a decision not to collect data from the longitudinal cohort study. So we are administered, or for the sample, for the qualitative study sample, we interviewed separate set of adolescents, no? And also the qualitative studies really focus on marginalized adolescents, not the adolescents in the mainstream, as represented by the quantitative data in the LCSFC. Although we also can identify the marginalized adolescents who are in the marginalized sector in the longitudinal cohort study survey data. So the main impetus or the motivation for doing the qualitative study component is to obtain, as you all know, for all of you who are qualitative researchers, is to get a better, to more context or deeper insights on the issues pertinent to the lives of children through adolescence, particularly among the marginalized. So the objectives are to identify the challenges that they face, particularly those that impinge on their basic human rights, to examine their support networks and resources that are available to them and who they access, and to identify the important aspects that need to be taken into account in future quantitative data collection rounds. So we also need to, from the qualitative data, from the narratives, we also get insights on what other questions to add in the quantitative study or in the longitudinal cohort study. As you all know, with qualitative data, we get deeper insights or more context on issues. So this complement the profiles that we can extract from the quantitative data in the cohort study. So from the qualitative data, we get narratives. So we get better insights on what is it like growing up in a marginalized sector? What are their coping strategies? How can they be helped? How are they being helped? So from these studies, we get to provide a voice, no, or a human face to the marginalized, or often not, unfortunately, not provided the kind of opportunity to be heard, unlike the non-marginalized children. So just like the quantitative data collection, we are collecting repeat measures, no, of the qualitative data. So it's also considered a longitudinal case study series. So the marginalized sectors that we collected qualitative data on, are those with disabilities, those living in armed conflict areas. This is focused only in the Mindanao domain, those from geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas, children from indigenous peoples, and those who are members of the LGBT+. So we collect mainly in-depth interviews of adolescents, it is given being a qualitative study or research. Our sample were selected purposefully, or it's a non-probability sampling method. So similar to the cohort study, the goal is to examine their circumstances and experiences over their life course from age 10 to age 24, not in the same frequency as the quantitative surveys, but in more with longer intervals, no? So we've conducted our baseline qualitative study in 2017 on 10-year-old marginalized children. And then we just completed the first follow-up on the same set at age 16 last year. And we hope to do 2 more visits to this sample at ages 18 or 20 and at endline. So at the baseline sample, this was done in 2017, we conducted a total of 80 in-depth interviews. Some of these are of the mothers, especially for the children with disabilities. And since at age 10, it would still be difficult for 10-year-old children to identify their sexual orientation, what we did was we conducted focus groups among 15 to 19-year-old LGBT members and asked them questions about how it was like when they were age 10. So in the 2023 follow-up, this time around, we were able to do in-depth interviews among the LGBT sector. And so we managed to do, and again, as I said, we revisited those who we interviewed at age 10 and managed to actually meet up with all of them. So we collected a total of 144 total paired IDIs, the baseline and follow-up. And so these are just some of at the baseline survey, these are just some of the challenges that were mentioned in the in-depth interviews. You'll see that some of these, they're common challenges faced by all the sectors, such as bullying. But then there are also like specific concerns that were expressed only by certain sectors, such as loneliness and isolation among those from the IPs, the IP adolescents, and also safety issues on the part of those from the armed conflict areas. So we also have a report that's been released on these that's available in the OPS website. And some of the policy recommendations that came out of the baseline study included counseling and psychological help on how to deal with bullying at home, in the neighborhood or in school, providing reproductive health care and preventive measures against sexual harassment. I remember in one interview of a mother of a child with disability, her biggest concern was for her child, who was a female child, to reach puberty or to reach menarche, to start having her menses, because she may not be able to handle events thereafter. So that's a legitimate concern, no, particularly for parents with disabilities. Also, broader participation of children, caregivers, and the LGU in school and community-based programs regarding various aspects of SRH, no, and gender issues. So we really need to provide a voice to the marginalized sectors, so not just the children, but also their parents. And capacitating the LGUs on how to serve the marginalized sectors better, including providing them with quality information on the special needs of these sectors. So the data for the qualitative follow-up round are still being analyzed, and hopefully we could also start sharing some of our key findings to the research community. As Dr. Drew mentioned, the qualitative data sets are harder to share because we still have to go through the identifying the data. While in the process of processing and analyzing the data, we want to keep the personal identifiers because of the references to get better context in the analysis. But once done, once we've exhausted the data analysis, then we can de-identify, meaning take out all the references to places, references to names. Okay, so let's proceed. Let me move on to the last presentation. This is a much longer presentation, so I hope we'll stay interested as well as awake. We have until 11:30 for the orientation. Of course, there will be more room for Q&A. So let me go to that. So I'd like to give you a sneak preview on some of the key findings or highlights of from the data to date, from ages 10 to 16. So we collect data on food insecurity, household food insecurity, and in this slide shows the trends. So one important aspect or feature of a longitudinal study is that we're tracking the same group of people over time. And so we could really look at important changes in the sample, in the cohort. So we're not, unlike some of the national surveys that we have, they're looking at a different set of people at each time. They still provide trends, but in our case, we're really presenting true trends because we're looking at the same set of people. So if you look at this slide shows the different categories of food insecurity. So the blue bars would represent those who are food secure or not food insecure. And then we have the mildly food insecure, moderately food insecure, and the severely food insecure. We collected this data using the food insecurity experience scale, which is also the instrument used in evaluating SDG programs. think the National Food and Nutrition Research Institute also uses the same instrument, and we're glad to know that our results are actually consistent with the findings from national surveys. So what I would like to point out here is that if you look at the blue bars, so at the top would be the data collected in 2016, and this is using household level data. You'll see that in 2016, about 17% of the households, so remember these are households with children, no? With 10-year-old children. That you'll see that from 2016 to the first quarter of 2020, you see an increasing proportion of households who are no longer food insecure or are food secure. So that's a very promising trend. And this is, we see the same trend in the results from the Food and Nutrition Research Institute. So we have an increasing trend of food secure households. And this is important to know, particularly since our sample is representative of households with children, considered to be more socioeconomically challenged households. But if you look at the data from wave 4A or in the last quarter of 2020, this is the November 2020's phone tracking survey, the proportion of food secure households considerably dipped, no? From 29.3% in the first quarter to 20% in the last quarter. These are all weighted proportions, no, making adjustments to the differences in attrition rates. And by the later stage of the pandemic, there's a slight increase, about 23%. And then by 2020, after the pandemic, the rates of the proportion of the food secure households in the sample now corresponds closely to the pre-pandemic rate of 29%. So what this tells us is that these are the amount of, so we lost time. We were on our way to making enough sufficient progress in attaining food security in this sample, but then this was disrupted by the pandemic. And so these are the opportunity lost, no? So we're back to the pre-pandemic rates. And you'll notice too that the shift actually were more from food secure to mild or moderate food insecurity, not so much in severe food insecurity. And the Visayas experienced the highest rates of severe food insecurity from 2016 to 2019. Mindanao at the highest rates from 2021 to 2022. This is like towards the post-pandemic era. And Luzon had the most, appeared to be the most advantaged in terms of food security. And this tells the same story as what I've earlier stated. In terms of education, again, we collect a wide array of school-related indicators in the study. And what we've noticed to date from ages 10 to 16, that females have are more disproportionately advantaged in terms of schooling, in all aspects of schooling. So females are more likely to stay enrolled than males over time. And the proportion who enrolled, while it has a decreasing trend for the national sample, the proportion who decrease in enrollment, the proportion of out of school youth significantly dropped, no, among males compared to females. So if you look at the trend in the rate of prevalence rates in 2016, about 98% of the sample of the 10-year-olds were enrolled, and this also corresponds to the national data. But by age 16, only 96% were enrolled. And among the girls, about 99% were in school at age 10. And at age 16, but it dropped, but still at a high of 98%. But among the boys, you'll see that about from the 98% who were enrolled at age 10, only 94% remained enrolled at age 16. There were no significant differences across island groups except at age 10. In terms of being on track with schooling, so we created variables, a variable referring to being on track with schooling. This means that the grade level the index child is in at that particular wave is in an age-appropriate grade, meaning they started grade 1 at the right age, and that there were no missed or repeated school years. So if you look, the slide shows the proportion of the adolescents who are on track. So at age 10, overall, about 91% of the 10-year-old children were on track, meaning they were in age-appropriate grade levels, and there were no missed or repeated school years. And so this variable is will be on a decline, expectedly on a decline over time, because once you're off track at age 10, you're off track the rest of your schooling career. So at age 16, we're now the proportion or on track has significantly reduced to only about 80% of all the 16-year-olds. But the proportion of those who are on track significantly are lower, is lower among males, no? From an 89% being on track at age 10 among the males, they're now down to 75% by age 16. They may be in school, but they may have either repeated a grade or have missed a school year. For the girls, from being 93% on track at age 10, it's now down to 86%, even still higher than the national average. And Mindanao adolescents consistently are shown to be off track. Higher proportion of the Mindanao adolescents are off track compared to their Visayan and Luzon peers. So we also looked at the schoolwork patterns among the adolescents. So we expect that most of them will still be in school, purely in school, but then we know that there are also those who engage in early work or in child work or child labor if the circumstances of their work is considered hazardous. So at ages 10 and 11, about 70%, about 30% of the have reported any form of child work or child labor. When we look at the kind of work that they were engaged in, most of these qualify actually as child labor or in hazardous circumstances. And a higher proportion of males were engaged in early work compared to females, and more were engaged in child work in the Visayas and Mindanao compared to in Luzon. And we actually have a policy note dedicated on child work and labor. And among the key points that we raised in that policy note is that, as mentioned earlier, being male is disproportionately associated with early child work compared to females. The females were more engaged in household chores. And having a household head who worked in piecework, farming or fishing, or owned a business is associated with increased incidence of child work or labor. So this, it means that those engaged in this kind of work, households engaged in this kind of work, tend to utilize their children to help with the household occupation. And lack of higher educational aspirations for index children is associated with child work or child labor, which is really sad. So those who are ever exposed to child work also tend to have lower expectations for college or for completing college compared to those who are not exposed to any child work at all. Also, there may be indications of those engaged in child work to be selective of those with lower school competency scores or lower cognitive capabilities. And we're starting to look at school and work patterns. So at age 10, we see that among the males, females, about 95% were in school compared to 93% among the males. And there was a larger proportion of males who are engaged in school and work, shown here in the dark orange bar, compared to the males. And about less than 2% were neither in school nor in work. And as they get older, in the more recent, in wave 7, we started to collect data on their training. So we could actually look at those who are not in employment, education, or training, or what we call as NEET, referred to as NEET. So at age 16, we see the same patterns in terms of the distribution of child work, school patterns. And what this implies is that being involved with school and work, any pattern that deviates from merely being in school, have negative associations with a human capital index scores, which is, I'll explain more about the human capital index in a little while. So we have collect several measures of adolescent health and development. So as I've earlier mentioned, this is one of the few studies in the country which looks at their pubertal transition. We could use the Tanner sexual maturity rating scales to measure their, for the girls, breast and pubic hair development, and well, as for the boys, their genital and pubic hair development. The children were shown drawings of breast and pubic hair developments across the different stages, and they were asked to identify at which stage they were in. So it's important to assess the differences, sex differences in pubertal development, particularly in assessing height. So this slide shows the height velocity, or the increase in height by pubertal stage. So we would be using the Tanner ratings as well as other measures of puberty in the study. We classified them into 5 stages, from stage 1 being pre-pubertal to stage 5 as being the most adult stage. And so you'll see, so in the study, we were able to capture the differences in growth velocity between girls and boys. So if you look at this slide for girls, biologically, girls mature faster than boys. So at age 10, when we conducted the baseline study, the girls were already already matured earlier, and in terms of height, they were starting to decrease in their height growth, or in their height velocity. So if you look at these lines here, the line in red, the girls in the red bar are represented by the red bar represents the girls who are the most fast maturing, in the group among the girls. So you'll see that from ages 10 to 11, the height velocity, or the increase in centimeters per year, has actually sharply decreasing or on the decline, up until age 13 to 16. You see the rest from stages 1 to 2, 3, and 4 behaving the same way, but not as pronounced as the fast maturing girls. And the girls represented in the black bar are the late maturing girls. And you'll see that their deceleration starts much later at ages 12 to 13 compared to all the rest. For the boys, and the slide shown on the right, you'll see that at the baseline, or at ages 10, they were still increasing their height. Actually, they're still experiencing their growth spurt up until age 12 to 13, when they start to decelerate, decrease and the increase in centimeter length. And this slide also further illustrates the differences in their height trajectories. So for the girls, when they started out from ages 10 to 13 as being taller than the boys, But at age 13, they converge, no? They change pace, where the boys now starts to increase to be taller than the girls. So I'm pointing this out because this is very important to factor in when assessing their stunting rates. So here we see that, so this slide shows the proportion were stunted in the sample over time. So at age 10, you'll see that in the green bar for all all 10-year-olds, about 30% were stunted. And this is consistent with what's being shown in the Food and Nutrition Research Institute National Nutrition Surveys. And you see that as they get older, actually the stunting rates decrease, no? Because this is when particularly driven by the boys' catch-up growth. Because some of the boys, as they get older, have now reached their height potential, and so have shifted, no, from being close to the margins of being stunted to being not stunted. So what explains this trend here can mostly be attributed to their differences in pubertal transitions. And Luzon adolescents consistently had lower stunting rates compared to the Visayas and Mindanao adolescents over time. And in terms of their in terms of their weight, for adolescents who are still undergoing puberty, we measure assess their weight status not by weight for age, but we use the body mass index as a parameter, because we need to factor in their height when assessing their weight, because they're still fastly growing linearly. And so what's interesting here is that in this slide is that male adolescents to be thinner than female adolescents. Also, on the other hand, a higher proportion of the males also tend to be overweight compared to females. So this slide illustrate the double burden of malnutrition on each end of the spectrum. So we're facing with a problem with undernutrition among the adolescents, as well as on the other end of the spectrum, overnutrition, involving the same group of adolescents. In terms of adolescent mental health, again, using the ACIBA set of instruments, we could look at the different measures, no, of mental health, from maladaptive aggressive behaviors to including depression and anxiety. So for this morning, let me just show you the data on anxiety and depression. Again, these are the CIBA measures that we administered. And so in measuring depression, the items shown in the orange bar are the items in the questionnaire that constitute the depression scale. So we calculate their mean scores for depression in the depression scale, and also categorize the mean scores into levels of severity, whether they're in the normal, borderline, or in the clinical stage. Once their scores fall under the clinical stage, this indicates that the problem is likely to be true. By the way, the CIBA instrument is not diagnostic in purpose, but this is really used for research purposes, just to be able to put the adolescents in the proper spectrum as far as depression is concerned. So you'll see in this slide that the mean scores for depression, actually the mean scores appear to be decreasing, over time. And if you look at the red bars, which represent the clinical stages, so boys tend to have higher proportion of boys tend to be classified as in the more severe categories compared to the girls. But overall, the depression's mean scores were actually declining. So it's not so much depression that was the issue, even during the pandemic. What is more concerning are the results in anxiety. So again, these are the anxiety items that constitute the anxiety scale components. And again, the mean scores are categorized as normal, borderline, and clinical. And in this slide, let me go through the slide with you. So at the top bars represent the pre-pandemic values. And for the females, you'll see that from, again, the red bar represent those whose scores are fall under the clinical stage. So the proportion that fell under the clinical stage was increased from 1.4% in the pre-pandemic period for the girls to about 18% in the early pandemic stage. And in the later pandemic stage, it sort of declined to 6.5%. We see the same trend among the boys, where although they have still higher rates in the later stage of the pandemic, it's still somewhat lower than when it was in the early pandemic stage. So overall, the adolescents were really experiencing anxiety, particularly in the early pandemic period. And as the pandemic started to towards the end stage, we see a lowering, decreasing proportions classified as clinical, but still higher at a higher rate than it was in the pre-pandemic period. So I guess important important note to remember here is that during the pandemic, I think the most vulnerable are the adolescents, particularly those at these ages. So among the factors associated with depression and anxiety were, while females have higher mean scores, when you actually categorize the scores into severe levels of depression or anxiety, males appear to be at greater risk because they have lower cutoffs for these stages. In other words, it just takes a smaller mean score for males to be categorized as borderline or clinical compared to females. Pubertal maturity levels were positively associated with depression and anxiety. So as they mature, they tend to register the events around them more and are therefore more at risk for depression and anxiety. Being in school appears to be very protective against depression and anxiety, particularly at age 11. Urban adolescents are at greater risk for these vulnerable mental health measures. And also, in a separate analysis, we see that a greater exposure to more severe forms of COVID exposure in the community tend to also increase levels of anxiety. We also started measuring their sexual experiences and their pregnancy experiences at age 16 in the latest wave, but 8% have reported to have experienced sexual intercourse, more among males than females. And of these, about 26% had first sex before age 15. And the mean age at first sex, so this it's important to consider that they're all at age 16 at this point. So the mean age at first sex at the age 16 wave is 14.6 years. About 3% of all the girls were ever pregnant as of wave 6 or at age 16, and more than half of those who have had sex became pregnant. So very important statistic to take note of. We also have questions that measure the exposure to violence. And as they reported more, they tend to report more exposure to bullying or being physically hurt from by peers or by adults and even by parents at the early ages. As they get older, they report less of these. No, so it's probably their tolerance for such as must increase, or that they are more capable of coping or defending themselves against bullying. This slide shows the proportion who reported witnessing physical violence at home. In some of our analysis, this appears to be a very important exposure variable to some outcomes, adolescent outcomes. And the adolescents in the Mindanao were the reported the highest exposures to witnessing physical violence at home, particularly at ages 11 and 12. So from the data that we've collected, we're able to create or assess their human capital formation, which is one of the key analysis goals in the study. So again, human capital is defined, this is a term coined by the economists to describe personal attributes that increase one's likelihood of being economically productive. This includes their educational level, their knowledge, skills, good health, and other qualifications that would increase their productivity level. And so in the LCSFC, we created a human capital index, which mimics the World Bank's human capital index, where it estimates the cohort's human capital foundation or their capacity to be productive as adults. It's a score that ranges between 0 to 1. Higher scores mean the maximum potential for human capital. And this measures 3 separate domains, no? Their lifestyle, their risk, propensity for risky behaviors, their health profile, this includes morbidity, stunting, and wasting, and their school performance, including their cognitive scores, so included the Raven's IQ test scores in this measure. So from ages 10 to 15, we still have to calculate the corresponding value for the latest wave. But this slide shows that as consistent with the school performance indicators, females tend to have higher HCIs, human capital scores, than males over time. And across the waves, Luzon adolescents have higher mean HCI scores than those from the Visayas and Mindanao. Again, what a strong driving factor here would be their health, the health domain, stunting, as well as their school performance indicators. So all these that I presented earlier show the value of having longitudinal data measuring the same set of cohort or sample over time, as we could clearly see trajectories or trends on specific variables over time. So that's a very important value of having longitudinal data. And another aspect of longitudinal studies is that we're able to look at precedence to outcomes. No? In this case, the next set of slides I'd like to show you are the most recent analysis that we have conducted, looking at early precedence to adolescent outcomes. So looking at factors in childhood that influence well-being in adolescence. So again, the strength of the longitudinal data is that we can clearly establish temporal sequencing events. No? So exposures, we can clearly distinguish exposures that precede the outcomes. So we could actually look at causal pathways. So this is an important way of looking, this aspect or this attribute is important in tracing pathways to link childhood conditions to adolescent outcomes. and identifying windows of opportunity for intervention during childhood. So one of the analyses that we're currently working on is childhood exposures that are associated with higher human capital index scores at age 15. And our preliminary analysis showed that having attended nursery or early learning exposure is associated with higher HCI scores. Exposure to reading materials at age 10, sorry, I missed out one number there, at age 10. And not being exposed to early work. So children who were not exposed to early work at ages 10 and 11 were more likely to have higher scores than those who were exposed to early work at these ages. Having both parents in the household having higher wealth index scores, meaning richer households, tend to have children with higher HCI at age 15, and being in food secure households as well. All these are in results from models controlling for sex, as we all know. Females tend to have higher HCIs than males. And in terms of risk of being it's classified as in higher anxiety categories or in borderline or clinical stage anxiety categories. Childhood characteristics that are associated with severe anxiety in male, having higher IQ scores. Apparently, our psychologist interprets this as those who have higher IQs tend to be more anxious with their grades and with other aspects in their lives. Having severe household food insecurity versus those being food secure, witnessing domestic violence and also experiencing emotional bullying, particularly by parents, tend to be associated with severe anxiety as they get older. So these are just some of the highlights that we have come up with. And also, in some of our analysis now that we have longitudinal data, we're also running longitudinal models. So this is for more specific outcomes where we're looking at in the longitudinal models, we're looking at, we can see whether the relationships between exposures to the outcomes at each age changes as they get older. So perhaps in future forums, we can share with you some of our longitudinal model results. But I guess I'll stop there, and hopefully what we've presented so far has given the idea of what the LCSFC is about, what variables can be examined, from the data sets. And so hopefully after this, we will have more interests from the students and faculty using the data.
Thank you, Doc Judy, for sharing the research design, the data structure also, and also the results. I find the results very interesting, Doc Judy, especially among the girls. Now it seems they are more kugihan, but males they are working. It's
Yes.
particularly also heartbreaking for
Yeah.
them to experience anxiety, but it's interesting, the higher the IQ, it appears, the more likely they are to experience anxious. So that's also
I think there was the saying that if you're, so the more the higher IQ and the more the ones who are registering, processing the events on the deeper level, so they get more anxious that way.
Yeah, in that sense, Dr. Jude, it's understandable. But again, thank you very much for sharing all the results. Some of them are inspiring, some of them heartbreaking at times. But data set is interesting, but I think we're still doing this for the Filipino children. We don't want to forget that they are children and not just a set of data.
Yes. And I think what's also, well, critically interesting is that our results are consistent with the data that the other national surveys are presenting, but but we I guess we have significant edge in that we're looking at this longitudinally and also following up the same cohort. So we actually we could better look at the precedents. So particularly for the more adverse adolescent outcomes. What happened? Unsa may nahitabo before this happened? No? What were they exposed to that may have led them to such adverse consequences? So that's one angle that we could more empirically examine in such a list.
Okay, thank you, Doc Jude. Would it be okay if we open the floor now, the virtual?
Sure.
May I invite our grad students, faculty, whether they have comments, questions. I remember Doc Grace Paayas, the Dean of Grad School. She made a comment in the chat box. Doc Grace, maybe you'd like to share your comment. Yes, Doc. Doc Grace.
Good morning. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I really, having heard all those from the start until this time, it's highly motivating. And I think there are just a lot of potential research topics that our graduate students can really explore. Very substantive and with great potential for future publication over and above knowledge dissemination. So you are very, very blessed that you're given this avenue. Thank you for all the speakers, because I really find this information highly helpful for our budding researchers. And I think they are well directed in terms of the direction, directed in terms of research endeavors. And hopefully they will, after this session, they will be able to realign whatever they are doing at the moment in preparation for their respective study, plans. So I mean, thank you very, very much to all the speakers for giving us this opportunity to listen. These are highly valuable, more than, not even equated to the price of any gold or whatever it is. Very important gem or asset in the whole world. Very important information. So I hope our graduate students, as well as we, in the education arena, will be able to also capture some of important topics to really conduct research on in the future. So I think that's all I can. It's highly motivating. That was the term I gave earlier, Miss Doc Cello. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doc Grace. It's inspiring. And I also saw Miss Marinel's question. Miss Marinel, are you still here? Maybe you'd like to ask the question, so you can provide us a context. So Miss Marinel is asking what are the differences, if I could read it, Doc Jude. Ang question ni Miss Marinel is, what are the differences in accessing data from international organizations and from national agencies? Does it take longer to access data from one or the other? Doc Jude?
Yeah, I think I responded to that. So each research institution has different requirements. And the same goes true for national agencies, like the Food and Nutrition Research Institute may have different data use, data release requirements. So it's really very specific to the research organization. If I may also add, I think for the Xavier University graduate students, you have the added advantage of having Dr. Chona Chavez as a member of your faculty, because she really knows the data very well. And so you have that edge. So I'm volunteering you, Chona. So and so it's a important asset for the students, because they have faculty members very much involved with the study. And since I guess Xavier is also very important to us, given a very strong RIMCO connection. If I guess down the line, if there are those who are really using the data for their dissertation or for their thesis, if you would like to schedule another forum, this time for more maybe more advanced. So it's different once you've already taken hold of the data and if you've played around with the data, I'm sure you'll have another layer of questions that you would like to ask us, and I'd be happy to maybe arrange that. But if there's a person in the group, we could have another session, follow-up session, perhaps. We're not offering this to all the schools. We're offering this because of Dr. Chona.
Jude, and thank you, Dr. Chona. Dr. Chona is raising her hand, and also Sir Luther.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Chona,
Yeah.
please.
I was just about to say, but Doc Judith just mentioned it. I was just saying, Bana, basin some of these students are like na overwhelmed on what
Yes.
was being presented. So actually, with at the very beginning with Dean Rach, I think we redesigned the how this will go because this will be an orientation. So, and then as what Doc Judith also mentioned, there is really it's a workshop na naay nga kanang guidan unsaon kay basig maingon mo hala unsaon man ni kalisod ato you might be seeing it as difficult, and for others who are used to dealing with data it may not be, but for others who is it's the first time but they have it as concepts or and as part of their their subject but no hands-on experience in dealing with data set. So do not be constrained with that. Kay basin there are very interesting topics that you want to work on, but as what Doc Judith noted also, there will be a second phase. Pangitaan pagka kwarta Doc Jude, no? How to go about para naagyoy ka ng accompaniment on how like we even us the partners we underwent such session as well on how to go about, how to merge, etc. So on kanang maulang na one of the assurance na if ever you are really interested, then it can be we will try to find means to organize and how to go about on a workshop basis on how to go and how to deal with the data set. So I think Luther Dean Rach, Luther is also raising his hand. Over to you, Dean Rach, for the facilitation.
Okay, thank you, Doc Shana. We'll also help in the second phase, wherever we can. So thank you very much. Yes, Sir Luther. Sir Luther.
Nagmahay na si Luther, Lut.
Ikaw na yung virtual hand, Doc. Okay, Sir Luther.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks, Ma'am Rachel, no, and then Doc Chona. Hi, Ma'am Judith, mayong buntag. Luther Lagabitan. I just would like to ask, given the data so far and the findings presented so far, no, and I would like to relate this study, this longitudinal study, in the context of the global study that finds our Filipino students lagging behind when it comes to the performances in reading, math, and science. Have you seen any factors that can probably contribute as to why our Filipino students are lagging behind students from other countries? I don't know if that question can or I am trying to connect this longitudinal study with a global perspective, no? Because we are really lagging behind, no? Filipino students when it comes. I think it's being conducted by the PISA program of International Students Assessment, where the Philippines is lagging behind against other countries in Southeast Asia with regards to reading, math, and science. So I don't know if there are factors that have been found out so far based on the findings that will connect to that, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. No? If you recall when I presented earlier, I mentioned that the EDCOM 2, the second congressional committee that will look into with a focus on education, are now looking at the data. And so that's one of the, we won't have the same set of parameters that PISA has used, no, because we need standardized test results. Unfortunately, we've been requesting that from DepEd, but they still could not provide the data to us. If we had the results of their of any standardized test for that matter, we could look into that or empirically. For now, we don't have the data to assess that, but the EDCOM2 group, we're assisting the EDCOM group in looking at ways to improve the capacity of students, particularly of represented by the sample. So yes, we're also as concerned, no? And but unfortunately, we don't have data on validated or on standardized tests to really look into and use in the analysis.
Thank you, Doc Judith. Salamat.
Okay, salamat, yes, Sir Luther. Napawatay mga laing pangutana pa kang Doc Judy. Yes, Ma'am Nancy. Yes, please, go ahead. Ma'am Nancy. Ma'am Nancy Kokamas.
Naka-mute, no?
Ma'am Nancy, naka-mute pa daw day ka.
Nance, you are recognized.
Ma'am Nancy. I cannot unmute you, ma'am. I'm trying. Ma'am Nancy. Doc, while waiting for Ma'am Nancy, Doc Jude, I have na ko a few questions, but I think these are kanang technical na lang or related to the data, to the access, to the application, to the access of data. Ang una na ko nga pangutana, Doc Jude, is nabay parang eligibility criteria, eligibility or qualifications para may maka-access sa data. For example, dapat ba na may naka-statistics na ang estudyante, dapat ba naka-research methods na, etc.
Actually, we from what I know, no, because we helped UNFPA design the data use agreement. Actually, the data use application is based on one of our studies at OPS also. So we indicate in the data use form, you indicate the purpose for using the data. So whether it be for a thesis, dissertation, for a research presentation in a conference, and then we ask you to include the objectives of conducting the research. So, and then the data use committee reviews that. So at OPS, we screen, so we get, at OPS, we also have other longitudinal studies, no? That's, I guess more famous would be the Cebu Longitudinal Health and Nutrition Survey. So we get a lot of requests globally for the study. So we screen, the committee screens the purpose for collecting the data, even the objectives, analytical objectives. Because if we find that there's no merit or there's no really good medical basis for doing the analysis, we give back that comment. Perhaps we say that the data set may not be able to support your research objectives. So the data use agreement asks you to indicate for what purpose you're using the data, what your research or what your analysis objectives are, and then we evaluate. So in other words, you can't just request the data because you just want to have the data with you. Let's say you're collecting data sets. You can't do that. You have to have a purpose for that because there's a timeline, no? Until when your data use is applicable. So oftentimes, if you're working on your thesis on a research paper, even on for a term paper, and so we also ask the advisors, no, to also sign off the data use request for students.
Okay, thank you, Doc Jude. So my understanding is we'll have to apply for request for the data use. There is a form that we need to submit, and it has also to be screened in terms of our purpose, and there's a timeline for the use of the data set.
Yes.
Okay.
In the future, because that's often the trend nowadays, no, before big data, in other words, in the future we'll be able to release the data in the public domain. That way you can just download the data, and then without our supervision.
Okay, thank you, Doc Jude. Si Ma'am Nancy, yun siya, wala na siya audio, pero
I see.
pero
Yeah.
pwede ka, Ma'am Nancy, nakuan, ibutang imong question sa chat box kung na kay question.
Any
Ma'am
rate, perhaps as Dr. Chavez has said, no, this is just really to give you a preview, no, of what the data is about, what the study is about, and for you to like mull over, and perhaps if there are students who are really interested in exploring the data, they can send us an email to explain what research angle they, or maybe course it through Dr. Chona, being a member of the faculty, explain what research angle they're interested in, so we can more or less at least say if the data can support that particular research.
Okay, thank you, Doc Judy. Any more questions? Kung naa pa, kaya nga atong time check is 11:29. Okay. So kung na pa tay mga pangutana, maybe as Dr. Judy suggested, ay, na question si Ma'am Nancy. If I could read it for Ma'am
Sure.
Nancy.
Sure.
May I know if you have collected data on relationship between living arrangements and academic performance and risk behavior? Of course, among Filipino children.
Yes. That's, yeah, thanks for that. In fact, Doc Drew and his team will be looking into that. We're looking at residential stability, household composition, changes in the household composition, and how it impacts school performance. So there's as you request for the data, we'll also send you the list, publication lists. So you'll know which topics have already been looked at or being looked at, you know. But as I said, a topic can be very broad now. So the UNFPA group is looking at residential stability and household composition changes as it impacts school performance in later life, in later adolescence. No? But if you're interested in that, you can look at other angles, no? Even when it's the same topic, you can look at other angles. And then the other is on risk behaviors. Yeah, so we've starting to see one hypothesis would be the in unstable or dysfunctional household household composition or household dynamics might also increase the risk for riskier behavior. So increase the propensity for riskier behaviors. So yes, that's one angle that you could look into. There's another question in the chat box. Is it possible to have a table of contents of your? Okay, as I've said, we have an inventory of variables that you could request that will go along in your data use request. So you'll be able to see what variables were collected and which files have them.
Okay, thank you, Doc Judy. So just as a first step, sa among mga estudyante ug sa among mga teachers nga interesado to have access sa data, ang among first step is to make a data request, Doc, no?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Ang among atong time kay 11:32 naman. So kung napatay mga pangutana, basin i-chat na lang or basin i-email na lang po sa among office, then we'll try
Yes.
answer
Yeah.
the questions. We can email it to Doc Shona and maybe those questions can be answered.
Yes.
Okay. Sa si Doc Grace kay parental migration and children's psychological well-being is one possible study. Doc Grace, we can do together. We can try to work it. We work on it together. So at this point, may we present our certificate of appreciation, deep appreciation to Doc Chona and Doc Jude and Mom Abet and also Doc Drew. Jan, we have certificates, Jan. Okay, thank you, Jan. So may I present this certificate of appreciation? Pwede pa dakuon gamay, Jan? Kay ko kita. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is our certificate of recognition and really deep appreciation for Dr. Chona, for Dr. Pwede pa ni siya modako dyan? Iyo ka basta. Sorry ka ayo ma'am ha. Itong mga mata niya ni. Okay. So this is for Dr. Chona for her contribution, exceptional, significant contribution as our resource person, actually leading us to the LCSFS orientation, data orientation today, April 27, and has significantly contributed to our growth as researchers in the graduate programs in Xavier University. So this is signed by our Vice President for Higher Education, Dr. Juliet Dalagan, and also signed with gratitude by our President, of course, Father Mars P. Tan. So let us give Dr. Chana a heart for her support. Okay, thank you, Doc Chona. Okay, our next certificate again is for Dr. Judith B. Borja. So again, the same deep appreciation for taking the time to walk us through the data set and the variables and answering our questions. We're really interested, Doc Judith, pero amo pag yung gina-digest kay
Yes. Yes.
naku kaayo de siya nga data. Okay. And listening to the results, I find it also interesting, and I'm hoping to examine the variables on mental health. Kay naaman pod ko sa psychology, so I think that would be very interesting. Okay, thank you, Doc Chona. The certificate is for you. This is again signed by Dr. Juliet Dalagan and also Father Mars P. Tan. He's also PhD in marine bio. Okay, next please. Okay, we're also thankful to Ma'am Abet Bas for orienting us with the data set. I found that your data set is cleaned, na siya integrity good, kay it has been checked over and over again. So that is what I got from Ma'am Abet's presentation a while ago, that your data has strong integrity and also ethics and also adhered to research ethics. So this is again the certificate to Ma'am Abet. Okay, let us give a heart to Ma'am Abet. Okay. Let us also give another heart to Ma'am Judith. Sorry, Ma'am Jude, nakalimot. Okay. And napatay last is Dr. Charles Andrew Bautista. Bata pa man di siya, no?
Yes.
Dr. Drew. Okay, lahi po akong imagination sa pagtanaw na ako sa akong stock. Kay bata pa man di siya. So we thank him for taking the time to understand he must be very busy. But this certificate
yeah.
is okay also. Nainangutan na kung single pa ba daw kuno siya. So
Unfortunately,
already
taken.
Already
taken.
Kay cute daw kuno siya. So, pero we give a heart to Dr. Drew. So, thank you again very much to Doc Drew, to Ma'am Abet, Ma'am Jude, and also to, of course, our own Doc Chona. So we give again everyone a heart and a clap. Okay, thank you very much. May also invite everyone to fill out the evaluation form that we will send in the chat box in a bit. Ang kanang evaluation form kay naa ra ba na siya baylo kanang when you submit the completed evaluation form, only then you will receive your certificate. Okay, so mana na karon Doc Jude. Okay, so
Okay, Doc.
because your feedback of course it's invaluable. Okay, so the evaluation link is already here. Yes, please access the evaluation link. We also have a modest honorarium for you, Doc Jude and Ma'am Abet and Ma'am Chona, Doc Chona, and also to Doc Drew. And the operative word kay modest. Modest lang. So thank you very
You,
much. So if
you
you
don't need to, you don't need to, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc Jude. If you plan to have another session for those, I will call again the students. I will raise the question kung kinsa gyud ang interesado gyud with a concrete plan to pursue their thesis or their papers using this data set. We will give a call to them, so we'll have a firm number and their firm names and their firm commitment. So if you plan to have another session with them, then we can arrange and maybe help with the budget on how to go about the data or the data set, the actual data set. So we will try to help on that area, Sab. Okay. So again, the evaluation link. Si Ma'am Olive cannot evaluate daw kuno as well. Maybe we can check, Jan. Okay. Doc Olive, na anay naka-evaluate daw kuno tulo na, so it should be functional. So maybe some internet connections na lang. Okay. So again, thank you very much to Doc Judy, Doc Chona, and Doc Drew, and Ma'am Abet. And again, thank you everyone for taking the time and for attending today's sessions. I'm sure this is informative, also inspiring, and motivating. And before we end, magpa-picture sa dakonota. Sa una kay magpakudak man ta, pero karon kay wa na may kudak. So magpakudak sa daw konota. Okay. So may I request everyone to please turn on their cameras kay mga gwapa-gwapo manggidta sa Sabado. Okay, thank you very much. So Doc Abet, okay, Doc Olive. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, and smile, Jan.
Okay, Doc. We have 2 slides. Okay,
Okay.
first slide. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, next slide. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Nag-check attendance mi ato, Doc Jude. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again, Doc Chona.
Salamat.
Daghang
Thank you
salamat.
also for this
Daghang
opportunity. We
salamat.
really appreciate it. And I really hope tunay ma-interested, no? And as I said, you have the edge, no? You're very malakas kayo ang Xavier University sa especially we really will find ways, no, to help.
Okay, okay. Kami po, Doc, will find ways na
Yes, yes. So yeah, I really hope, because that's the whole purpose of the LCSFC, no, is to provide this database for people to use.
Okay, thank you very much again. So sige kami thank you ani kay na-overwhelm mi dili lang sa data kundi sa inyong kanang generosity to share the data. I hope to collaborate with a research project with some of the faculty. Doc
Yeah.
Grace or naghatag assignment ani. Okay, so please we can do this also. In our research class also we can do some papers related to the LCSFC data. Okay, thank you very much again. Thank you for attending today's sessions.
Bye.
We wrap up.
Daghang salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a great
Salamat.
Salamat. Have a great day. Okay, have a happy, restful weekend. Okay, salamat. We can give
Happy
everyone a
weekend.
heart before we can go. Before we go, maybe you'd like to give everyone a heart. Thank you, Sister Alicia. Okay, thank you very much.
you.
Salamat.
Bye.
Thank you, Sir Hermes. Parang ano kayo, God kayo ang ngalan, Sir Hermes. Okay. Salamat, John. Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Beth.